Well, folks, we promised you an unboxing today, and we're going to hold that promise. So, welcome to the unboxing of the Quantum 225 and the new KLANG vokal and controller. We're very excited to be here today and show you these new products. Most of you know who I am, I think, and I've got Ian with me today, who's going to push a bunch of buttons and twist some knobs for me, which should be fun. This will probably be a fairly quick session, not as long as some of the other ones. We're going right into product, no presentations, no slideshows, none of that today. So, but don't hesitate to ask any questions. It's pretty informal, and we're happy to answer anything along the way. So. Who wants to give us a drum roll? So do the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Can you see it? There it is. Oops.
Throwing boxes around.
Yeah. So this is it. We've got a brand new Quantum 225 console here, along with one of our brand new KLANG controllers and the KLANG vokal as well. So the Quantum 225 is the most recent, the latest generation of DiGiCo quantum consoles, any console for that matter from the line. It just released a few months ago, and it brings quantum features into a price point that we haven't seen before. So this guy is a console that for us is going to sit somewhere between something like an SD9 and an SD12, so that $40,000 to $50,000 range, but deliver those quantum features that things like the Quantum 338 or the Quantum 5 and 7 all have. So that's very exciting to enable those features to a to that kind of a crowd. And for us here in Canada, this is a console that really speaks to us because for many years the SD9 and the SD12 were our best-selling consoles, and they fit the bill at that 48 to 96 channel range, and they did what everybody needed to do. So we're really excited to have that here today. So we're going to have a quick look at some of the features on the 225, and then we'll jump into the KLANG controller and the vokal, and have a look at some of the software as well. So this particular guy is a 72 channel console, so it's got 72 inputs and 36 buses. We'll jump into the software real quick here and show you some of the quantum related features. So I'm going to do some talking, and Ian's going to do some pointing here, and we're going to switch the camera over just so you can see the overhead as well. Perfect. So one of the big things with quantum, obviously, you'll notice that this console has a much bigger screen. So we've got a 17-inch screen on this compared to the 15s. It's a pretty bright screen, Ian, right? I think it's 1000 nit.
Yeah, it's 1000 nit, and it's angled up a little bit, so it's much more useful outdoors.
Yeah, and you also notice we've got some additional real estate up top here too. So we have a full metering section that's available on all of this. The guys did a good job in keeping the relationship and the sizing all right, so that the size of the channel strip was the same throughout the range, but utilize that extra space on top here as well to do that. So.
They've also taken away the little red quick select buttons, and the quick select buttons are now actually on the screen, and it's a multi-touch screen as well.
So on every DiGiCo console, you always have an EQ and dynamics, but what's unique about quantum in this case is that we have something called mustard processing. And that is basically an alternate to the standard DiGiCo compression and gating and mechanism that way. And it does come with a couple of different options, I believe, eh?
Yeah, the mustard is actually in addition to, you can have the regular SD processing running on the console, and then you can also add the mustard to it. So it's like it's like an inserted processor channel inside the channel. So there's a couple of things you can have. There's a built-in tube, and there's 2 modes of tube, so you can emulate various tube amplification scenarios. And then there's 4 different compressors, and each one of those are modeled optical, VCA, etc., so that they emulate some of the more traditional analog style compressor architectures and circuit designs. And then there's also the gate as well. And you can add that to any one of the channels. And I believe the mustard, you can do 24 mustard on this console.
So yeah, so every channel obviously has EQ, and you can turn on this mustard processing 24 times in these cases. And what's nice about this is that it allows you to, it gives you another palette of options built into the console. So lessens the need to go outboard with waves or some of the other options if you just need a couple of extra, things. So the other big thing is something that we call nodal processing. And that basically is something that allows us to apply a set of dynamics and EQ specifically to a cross point. So Ian's popped up the aux send window here, and in this particular case, we can apply dynamics to this particular cross point.
You can add the node. It's like another version of the channel processing that gets added in just only on that aux. So you can go in, you can choose which ones you want to add it to, and you go yes, and now that's been added to aux 1 on whatever channel this is, channel 6, channel 9. And then to get to it, so
we have a new menu on the main screen under layout that shows us our options for that.
So then if I hit that on that menu and go back to the channel, you can see this represents all the processing, all the EQ, and the same dynamics and what that are inserted inside the channel and then before it goes out of the aux. And the other cool thing about this is on all the SD series consoles, there were 3 points where you could pick an aux off to go to where you could pick off the channel to go to the aux, which was pre-mute or pre-fader or post. But now there's a couple more new ones. So we can go pre-fade, pre-mute. We can pick them off between the EQ and the dynamics, and we can pick off the point before the channel EQ and dynamics, and we can pick it off the channel right at the very top after the high and low pass filters. So you can actually have completely independent and discrete EQ and dynamics going to the aux that is before any of the EQ and dynamics that you're using on the channel itself.
This is a great function for monitor guys because it really gives you the ability to tailor a sound specifically for an artist. So if the singer wants to hear the guitarist this way in their mix, but the bass player wants to hear it a different way, you can apply nodal processing to each of those cross points and give yourself that capability. So,
and on this particular console, there's 32 nodal processing points that you can utilize at your discretion anywhere you want.
Yeah, we used to have to double up channel strips and things like that to have a function like that, and that would achieve the same thing, but it gets to be very very tricky to keep that organized and flowing, especially with snapshots and things like that. So one of the other big things we want to talk a little bit about the True Solo.
Okay.
Yeah.
True Solo is I'll go back to the channel. True Solo basically adds whatever processing that you have on the auxiliary channel. So normally if you solo a channel, you would solo just what that channel is actually doing. And then if you solo the aux, you would solo what the channel is doing and what the nodal processing might be doing. With True Solo, you get the solo of also the EQ that is on the output of the auxiliary itself back onto the channel. So when you solo an instrument, you're actually hearing all the processing, the channel, the node, and the aux send in your monitoring, in your in-ears or whatever. So you get a true representation of what the artist is actually getting.
So that's a very neat function that goes well with the nodal processing. So you really got a really good idea what's going on there. So
Then there's Spice Rack.
yeah. So in addition to our standard DiGiCo processing, the Quantum series consoles have a new processor called the Spice Rack. We've got to love those British memes, but this allows you to do 6 instances of a completely different set of dynamics. So
Yeah, and for those of you who are running the current version of software who might have Quantum, it came with Chili 6, which is a multi-band compressor. But this console has the latest version of software, and they've included another new one called Naga 6, which is a 6-band dynamic EQ. So that's another new piece, and they're going to be adding new modules or new presets to this as time goes on. So it's going to be something that's going to be expanded upon as we move into the future.
Again, this is another great way to keep everything on board. Having these channels available, really gives you some additional processing. The Chili 6 is very similar to the Waves C6, and a very common thing that people used for outboard processing. So this plus the mustard processing and all of those extra capabilities mean you can do a lot more with just the surface as a whole. So one of the other things you'll notice on the surface physically is all of these strips here. These are actually LCD screens that are 100 pixels each. So they actually contain metering and can be fully customized. As well, the macro buttons that are up by Ian. We have 4 banks of 4 macros. They're the same screen, so they can also be customized and colored and completely adjusted that way. And like most of the other Quantum series desks, these guys have the kind of hidden until lit kind of a architecture where all the LEDs have a backlit. All the rotaries have a backlit LED there that corresponds with the channel function, both for the EQ and for the rotaries down below. So if we bring up a dynamic section here, those guys change color, obviously, as well. So if we want to, we'll flip to the back here and have a quick look at what's on the rear, because this is an important part of it as well too. So DiGiCo has really opened up the connectivity options on this guy that allow you to really tie in a number of different protocols.
Well, first of all, to start off with, like all DiGiCo consoles except the ST11, it's a dual power supply, so you have redundant power supplies. There's 8 analog in, 8 analog out, a pair of AES in and outs as well. We, as most of you already know, we use MADI as our protocol. With this newer series of desks, there's 4 MADI ports. Now these can either be used individually as 4 single MADI ports at 48K, or you can use them as redundant ports at 48K. So that becomes a primary and that becomes a secondary. Or if you're using the console at 96K, then it's a pair per. So it's 2 ports at 96K, 2 ports redundant, or 4 ports non-redundant. And there's word clock in and out. And optional Opticore if you want to connect some of our other devices and consoles and racks via Opticore. There's 2 DMI slots in the console. We have a DMI Dante in one of the slots here today. So there's a vast array of DMI cards that you can plug into the console to get in and out on a wide variety of different protocols. There's also, if some of you might be familiar with the original UB MADI, which was 48 channels bidirectional at 48K. So this is a newer version of the UB MADI that will do the same 48 channels, but it also sample rate converts. So if you're running the console at 96, you can also get 48 channels at 48K, even though you're running the console at 96. There's an optional Waves card that can be installed. So that can be installed separate from the DMI slots. So you don't have to use the DMI to do Waves. And there's also 4 network ports, 2 over here and 2 here, which are actually on a switch. So you don't have to have an external switch. You can connect the console and your waves and your wave server and etc. and without having to have a secondary switch sitting in the doghouse. And there's MADI, there's some GPI and GPOs, and there's a little cable through here. It's a little port hole in the back. So you can run your cabling through and it comes out the front. So on the front, there's the mount, which as you can see, we have a KLANG remote mounted on the mount, but you could put a touch screen for your waves or a secondary monitor for the console or a script tray or something on the front. And that's a nice, neat way to cable that and leave it cabled and installed even while the console's in transport.
I just want to talk quickly about a few points that Ian mentioned. One of the big things too that we've seen on some of these smaller consoles is the ability to have optical for one, but also the ability to have a secondary optical loop. So this expands the capability and allows this console to bridge onto much larger networks. So each of these optical loops are capable of handling, I think, 1,024 channels of audio each, something along those lines. And this console with two allows you to bridge into potentially two different opticore networks and grab audio from both sides. So you have, of course, two optical loops, each with 1,000 channels, 4 MADI ports at 56 channels each, and 2 DMI card slots at 64 channels apiece. And then additionally, the waves port on top with another 64 channels. So as you can see, there's about 5 or 6 different ways to get audio, to get those thousands of channels of audio into the desk, without issue. So yeah, very capable. And with the Quantum, we're seeing things like that second optical loop and the built-in waves and all that stuff, just to really give you the flexibility and the capability. So any questions so far, guys? Great. Well, we'll flip back to the front for a second here. And can you go to the head-on shot?
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that got released last year that we were very excited about was the KLANG DMI. And this was a revolutionary card. So Ian talked about the DMI card slots in the back. This guy goes right into one of those slots and allows us to do the KLANG, hold this the correct way, 3D mixing within the console. So you may not have heard, but about a year or so ago, DiGiCo and KLANG partnered up. We offer direct integration with the KLANG card and mixing right into the surface. So one of the options you have the ability to do, and I'll get my sidekick here to bring that up, is that on a particular channel here, aux1, we have the ability to turn on the KLANG setup. And that allows you to basically control the KLANG integration directly from that. So just flip to the other screen for a sec and we'll have a look at what that looks like. So in this particular case, with this integration that the guys have put together, this allows us to apply KLANG to Ascend, and allows you to control the 3D capability of the mix right from the console surface. Both your horizontal and vertical panning of the actual source. And this is obviously for channels. So this particular channel going to that mix, you can position that in 3D space to really help yourself out. So just want to flip to the other one again there. So this particular card gave us a huge amount of capability. It allowed us to do 16 discrete stereo mixes with each 64 channels going into. So that offered the ability to do a huge number of 3D mixes for artists on stage, great for church applications, pit applications, and musicals, things like that. And in a case like that, and in a case like this, because we have the DMI card slots, this would be the obvious choice. But as an alternative option, KLANG has come out with their vokal, of course, and the controller. And I'll talk about the vokal first, and then we'll go into the controller here. What this guy does is it's very similar to the card we just looked at. It allows us to do 12 mixes with 24 inputs each, but you can pick between a pool of 64 channels. So we'll show you what that looks like in the software in a minute here, but that capability gives you a lot of flexibility in grabbing the channels that you need, but also servicing up to 12 mixes that way. So this particular guy is a fairly straightforward interface. If we flip to the back for a quick second, we have both Dante connectivity. So we have our 64 channels on Dante, which we're running for today's demonstration. So we have 2 ports of that. We also have 2 control ports. This is great for plugging in a wireless router directly and not having access to the actual Dante traffic. And then we have both a MADI and MADI in and out on coax BNC. And then we have a word clock here for sync purposes as well. So you can either feed the unit with Dante or MADI, or you can even use this box as a cross converter between the 2 formats. So you could go in MADI and generate a Dante stream from the same channels, all of those things. So one of the biggest things with the KLANG, flip back to the front for a sec, with both the KLANG card and the vokal is that this uses the next generation FPGA like the console. So we're able to generate these mixes with less than 1/4 of a millisecond of latency, which for in-ear monitoring is crucial. You know, the less latency that we can introduce into the path from the artist to the actual mix, the more realistic it is, and the more we can fool the brain and you know, and make it hear what you want it to hear. So that's a very unique interface. One cool thing too, along with our controller, is that built on the front here, we have the ability to plug one of these guys right in. So this is a PoE powered Ethernet jack meant for one of these guys. Now what this guy is something we've been asking for quite some time. It is a standalone controller for the KLANG system. So up until now, we've gotten by using computers, iPhones, tablets, Androids, anything like that to do the mixing and spatialization of the sounds. But now we have a standalone controller here that allows us to do the audio portion via Dante, as well as the full control of up to 24 channels. So as you can see, between these 2, they work quite nicely. This is a 24 channel unit as well as this. But intelligently, everything's been linked and grouped internally. So what we have on this particular guy, and kind of a neat in comparison or in conjunction with the console, is we've actually got a mount. So this section of the console here has a pass-through, cable pass-through to the back. You can see some light passing through there, and it's got these 2 pegs here. So DiGiCo has provided a nice little mount that you can either mount something like a controller on here, or you can mount an external screen for overview, and something a future touch screen is what we're pushing for, something we think will happen quite soon, hopefully. But this makes a great spot to mount this guy here. One of the biggest and most unique parts with the controller is not, you know, the ability to control everything. It's a lot of the other things that they've done with it. So one of the biggest, you know, hindrances to in-ear mixing is feeling disconnected. And one of the things this guy does really nicely is it introduces a pair of stereo Ambience mics to it. So if you look on the side here, right where the KLANG symbol is, you'll see a little microphone embedded there, and you'll see one embedded on the other side as well. And that gives us the ability to locally introduce these microphones into the mix, so that you get the feeling that you're, you know, not so disconnected with a set of really isolating earphones. So that's a huge function, very capable. Along with that, on the back side, we have a set of balanced outputs here. So this can be used to drive something like what those drummers use quite often as a butt kicker to give the feel, something that you typically lose when you have in-ears. And we've also got an additional headphone jack. We have a local line input here. So sometimes artists will feed in the click track locally. We can do that here. And because this is all Dante enabled, we can actually take that local input and we can send it back out over the Dante network. So we could generate the click track at my position here and send it off to everybody else via that.
Or it could be songs that you're rehearsing.
Absolutely.
And you can also do the same with the ambience microphones. So you can take the ambience and put that back out to the mix. So you can actually have one-to-one conversations between artists, even though they still have their earbuds in.
So one of the other one of the things they've done is, they've made it very similar to the console. So you'll see the same size screens as their typical units. We have one master volume control here. This is what we call a safe master. So this basically cuts everything out altogether, all the ambience, anything possible. So if this is down, there's nothing coming through. It's kind of a final master. We've got these 8 encoders here, and these typically correspond to channels, but they can also be settings. So one of the things that we can easily do in the KLANG to make it very user-friendly is group channels. So in this particular case, you can see I've got 3 LCDs and groups set up. You just want to flip to the other screen for a sec? It might be a little easier to see. Yeah. So I've got some tracks playing in from the Rankins today. So I've got my Vox group here, which has our 4 vocalists. I've got my guitar section, and it's a very light kit in this case, so it's got a few percussion channels as well. So I can give a novice user something like this with these 3 groups, and they've got relative level mixing basically within these 3 rotaries here, which is really nice. And then I also can flip down through these channels. So I have my groups 1 to 8. 9 to 16 and 17 to 24. So these then represent my channels, but you'll notice that they're color coded the same way as the groups were. So my first 4 encoders are purple, and then I get into these 3, which are pink, and then I get into my percussion section, which is kind of a yellowy orange. So I've got obviously volume control here, but pressing this configure button here, I can then flip into a secondary mode. And I can then access the KLANG mixing and the rotation of things. So this would allow me to adjust the panning around the head, in this case, as you'd see on the screen there, or I can go up and down as a vertical orientation. So we can do that right from the controller as well, which is really handy. So. And then there's an ambient section here where I can adjust the level of my ambience mics, my auxiliary input, and just an overall mix volume here as well. So there's a little metering section too, just to see where you are in the relative sense. So that's kind of a neat option. Yeah, so that's basically the controller there. The headphone jack is on the bottom, of course. I didn't show that before, but
yes, on the front and the back.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a mini as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's a
mini.
mini.
And then the mini as well. So
mini on the
if you
front.
happen to have lost your little adapter on your headphones, don't fear.
Yeah, you're well covered off for sure. So that's it for the physical portions. So we're just going to jump over to the software here, and for those of you that have seen it, this is kind of a refresher, but for those of you who are unfamiliar, this will be a little bit of a run through. So this is our standard KLANG screen, which I'll come to in a second. But typically we start from the configuration section here. So on my network, we have our KLANG vokal that we looked at first. So as you can see, we have the selection between any of our 12 mixes here, 1 to 12 as such, and that obviously changes the software to select that mix. And then down below, I've also got my KLANG controller. So they've added a fair bit of intelligence into the KLANG to allow us to adjust the controller from here as well. So we can do some, overall and administrative things with the controller from this section. So in the case of my actual KLANG mix here, I'm going to select mix 1. That's what we've been playing with today. I can come through my channels section here. This is where I set up my groups that we saw in the controller. So we've got group 1, our Vox, which has our 4 vocalists. I've got my guitar channels here, and then I've got some percussion channels down below. So there's really no limit to the grouping and setup. This is just a fairly straightforward and simple option. So you can do it that way. It's just a matter of dragging and dropping these as around just to organize them. So it's very straightforward. And you can even turn them on and off as I've done here, just to simplify and declutter what you see there on the system. In this particular case, we have a few settings. We can select our sample rate, so we can do 48K and of course full 96K. We do actually have something we call a root intensity EQ. So we can turn that on, and that allows us to have access to a very basic but functional EQ on all of the inputs. So if we're in a situation where we're sending the channels straight from a rack or an audio source right in here, we can do some basic EQing on those inputs right in the KLANG without needing a console. Most importantly, though, is our routing section here to get things up and running. We can see we're locked to Dante below here. Oops. But we do have a MADI connectivity or the word clock that we looked at. So on any KLANG system, we have just a quick matrix mixer where we decide, okay, where are we pulling the audio from and sending it to. So in my case, I'm grabbing audio from Dante coming in from the console, and I'm feeding it to the 3D mixer in this case. So you can see these cross points are showing up here. And by clicking on that link, we get the kind of a drop down here, or the expanded view of that routing. And then in my case, I'm taking the 3D mix, basically the after mix, and sending that back to Dante as well. So this would be the output, the stereo outputs, or I should say stereo 3D mix is coming back to the console as well. So very straightforward and easy routing, and you can expand on it and even do channel by channel connectivity here. So. And then, of course, once that's set up, we have our staged layout here, which is our 3D mixing session. So these are all of my channels. I only have I've only got 12 set up in this particular case, but you've got an icon per each, and we can drag and move these guys around the head as a horizontal pan option, and alternatively, by clicking on the stage button here again, we can flip this into a vertical pan section. So this allows me to elevate certain artists or certain sounds. And what I've always found handy is, putting the singers up in front typically, so elevating them up a little bit and moving the percussionists to the back, but also bringing them down, kind of below your waist level, so that that they're there, but they're not as prominent and as cute as you would be with some of the vocalists that we have here. So this represents a vertical up and a vertical down, kind of from your headspace. And then on the faders, we've got our relative level of all of the channels here. We've got a master section over here where we can adjust. So, and again, they're color coded by the groups, the purple and the kind of pink and the orange there as well. One of the unique things too is we looked at those group mixing as well. So I've got my 3 groups set up, and as we looked at on the controller, you can bump these guys up. And what's unique about the KLANG is that they've set this up to be kind of a foolproof method. So as you can see, as I'm bumping the Vox group up, it's actually decreasing the guitar and percussion down. So this is just doing a relative up and down. It's not actually increasing the overall volume. It's just relatively balancing the mix, which is great for saving your ears and being concerned about things like that. So that's a pretty handy thing. And then, of course, the mixer and the metering section.
There are multiple levels of access that you can set up in the system. So you can have some artists who have the full, they get to see both the mixer and the groups, or you can limit some to only see the group.
Yeah, so if I want to give this to a musician, I can put it into musician mode. They can pick a mix and they just have their stage set up here and faders. So very limited capability, but giving access to the functions that mean the most and get you to that point. So we flip back to admin here. If I go to the controller for a quick sec, you can see there's a couple of different things here. So the controller is just relative to the local setup on the controller. So we actually have the ability to play around with those ambient mics that we were talking about, so we can actually space them out and decide where we want those to go. And then we also have the ability to adjust where we want the auxiliary input stereo jack, could be your click track or your playback to rehearse against. You can choose where you want that to be as well. And that can be done on a controller by controller basis. So same functions as you would get normally, which is kind of neat. And then of course you do have those faders for the ambient mic, the auxiliary in, and then the Dante connectivity. Small meter bar as well. So that's pretty much it for our Klang setup and quick unboxing of the units. Does anybody have any immediate questions, or is this all clear as mud, ready to give us your credit cards?
A couple questions here.
Sure.
Going back to quantum features, can you describe the difference between true solo and AFL?
Leave that one for Mr. Ian.
Okay. PFL is, of course, pre-fade listen. So you get to listen to it whether the fader is up or down. AFL is after fade listen, which means your cue matches your fader movement. Both of those are after all the processing in the channel. It's literally just whether you decide to listen to it before the fader or whether you decide to listen to it after the fader. The true solo takes the EQ that you have on the aux send on the way out of the console, because remember your aux is actually feeding an aux channel. And if I have an aux channel here, I think there's some layer 2.
Yep, right here.
There's the auxes. So the aux channels on a DiGiCo, the same as the groups, all have the same processing EQ dynamics that all the input channels have. So you can have your own discrete processing, or even perhaps you might have a 31 band EQ inserted on that aux send. If you AFL or PFL at the channel, you don't get to hear any of that processing because it's downstream of the signal point where you're picking off your cue. True solo takes the signal processing that you have on that particular aux and applies it to your solo bus. So you're actually hearing any processing that you've done downstream of the channel, i.e. after you've dialed up the aux knob.
So in this case, this big 5K boost I've put on this aux, if you just did a standard solo, you wouldn't hear that, obviously, because it's on the aux master. But with true solo, you would be listening to it with that in place.
Hopefully that was clear enough.
Yeah, let us know if that didn't answer the question. But there's another one here. Is the controller meant to be placed at each musician like an Aviom system? So your system would have multiple controllers.
Absolutely, yeah. So these are meant to do two things. We've always had two parts to the equation with Klang. You've got to give users the ability to control the mixes, and that has been done traditionally with iPads or phones or anything. The guys did a fantastic job with the app, and one of the best in the business. But you did need something to actually adjust those levels. So there was the control part of it, and then there was also the audio part of it. So getting audio to that user was also the other half of the equation, and that could have been done from something as simple as a headphone line driver or a Dante headphone preamp, which we commonly sold in the past. But this particular unit does both. So it gives you the control for the mix and the connectivity for the audio. So typically, we do have some packages with the vokal and the controller where it's a vokal and 6 of these guys or something along those lines. But yeah, so you basically have one of these per position, and it doesn't mean you have to have it for everybody, but it just gives those prominent people or important folks the ability to do both in a very unique way.
Got a question. Are there any recording features built in to the controller?
Not directly at this time, but because it is Dante, we have the ability to take advantage of the Dante streams, and they can be recorded very easily with a Dante virtual sound card or a separate interface to get that audio.
I don't think I missed any. Any other questions?
There is one other kind of interesting feature built into KLANG, in so much that you can take, if you're the monitor engineer, you can take control of and listen to anybody's mix on stage from the software. So that's also a very handy thing. So a monitor engineer might have one of those sitting on their desk, as opposed to having to use the software.
Yeah, absolutely. That's called a queue-in function, where you can basically queue into somebody else's mix and basically hear what they're hearing, identify what a problem might be, and make a quick adjustment to that mix, and then jump back out of it. So you can queue in and queue out of it to mostly for troubleshooting purposes and just ease of getting somebody back up and running. Prior to that, you'd have to run over and plug your headphones into their receiver and kind of go at it like that. But this allows you to have access to any of those mixes almost instantaneously.
Have a question about getting audio into the KLANG device. They said audio can only be sent through network into the KLANG device. I'm not sure if they're referring to the actual controller. If they could clarify, Jayant.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. I mean,
Yeah.
In a case of something like the vokal, our means of getting audio in and out are MADI or Dante. If you're not using it with a mixing console, there's a number of different MADI options, analog to MADI or Dante to MADI, that will allow you to just get raw analog signals into something like this. The controller itself is meant to be used with either the KLANG DMI card in a console or the vokal. So all it's getting audio-wise is a stereo channel, a stereo set of channels from one of these guys. So all the heavy lifting is being done in the box or in the card in this case. So this is just this is getting your stereo mix out, also giving you the ambience mics, of course, and there's some additional things, but also and doing the control. So most of the multi-channel portion is done on the card or in the console itself. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I clarified vocal device. So I think we covered it. Certainly let us know if that's not the case.
The Fabric has analog in and out.
But it has a unique, actually has a unique ADAT option as well, which is a bit more common for recording studios and some legacy devices. So there's a lot of 8-channel analog to ADAT interfaces that can be tied right into the Fabric, and kind of dealt with that way as a more standalone setup. The vokal, is definitely meant and works great with MADI Dante devices of any flavor, and the card is definitely great inside of one of our consoles. So we've got a different spread depending on what you plan to use it for.
Yeah, the Fabric is a 2RU versus the 1RU. Similar looking though.
Yeah, a little bit bigger. Yeah.
What do the quantum model numbers mean?
I didn't hit that one. Yeah, there's 2 banks of faders and there's 25 faders.
Yes. Yeah. So 2, 12, 25, and the quantum 3 is kind of the same way. So it's got 3 banks of 12 faders and it's got 2 master faders. So that's where your 38 comes from.
I think that's all the questions in the chat. Anyone have anything else? Feel free to unmute and pipe in, or
Guess not, eh? Well, I guess that's it for today. Cool. Well, we appreciate your time, folks. Hope you enjoyed taking a look at this stuff today, and let us know if you have any questions. We have a few of these guys in stock. Happy to run through, happy to demo, do private sessions along these lines as well for your application. So don't hesitate to reach out on behalf of Ian and myself and Pete. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, everybody.